Hello and welcome to the Software Engineering Unlocked podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Michaela, and today I have the pleasure to talk to Ashley Hunsberger. Ashley is the Director of Developer Experience at Tackle.io. But before I start, let me tell you about my latest project, AwesomeCodeReviews.com. Yeah, all my work on code reviews has now its own dedicated home. At AwesomeCodeReviews.com, you find articles about code review best practices, code review checklists, news about the latest research on code reviews, and of course, workshops and courses I offer around this topic. So please hop over to AwesomeCodeReviews.com and check out my latest work. But now back to Ashley. Ashley is a vivid speaker and proponent of testing, and she loves to share her experience in conferences, during blogging, all about testing and engineering productivity. Before she was working at Tackle.io, she was the Director of DevOps Engineering at Blackboard. So I'm super thrilled to pick her brain today and, learn all about her experience. Welcome to the show, Ashley.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so happy to be here.
Yeah, I'm really happy. So I want to start really at the beginning. I know that you have been a tester at the start of your career.
Yes.
So how come that you're now, the Director of Developer Experience? How did you come into developer advocacy and so on? Wow. What's that path?
I'll try to give the short story, but it might become a long and winding journey, but that's okay. Yeah, I did start as a tester and, went from manual testing, and I'm not even going to say how many years ago because it feels like ages ago, and it was, but that's okay. So I started as a manual tester, and as many companies go, started to learn automation and really found a passion for leading that effort. So I went from tester, test lead, test architect into really becoming a technical product owner. How do I start advocating the voice of what is needed technically to balance against the features needed so that we can think about how do we design and create the frameworks and develop the automation that we need to get the feedback loops in place for our code. That kind of led me down to a path of really thinking about testing and continuous delivery and adopting DevOps principles of like flow and feedback and continuous learning and thinking about DevOps from a culture perspective. And once we had a reorg, I was asked to lead release engineering. Now that became a really interesting experience for me, not knowing a whole lot about release engineering, but being able to lead people and thinking about our infrastructure as code and how do we even test our infrastructure and guiding a team of DevOps engineers to be able to do just that. As we develop a microservice-oriented architecture, how do we create the easiest path forward for a team to spin up a service, develop what they need to, and not have to worry about the underlying architecture behind the microservices that they need to create. So my team creates the paved road at that point. But what I really found I was most passionate about was bringing people together, learning how to work together, and really focusing on people and their experiences at work. I was also asked, as you mentioned, I've been speaking in the industry a lot about testing. But what I really found it was about at the heart of it was how do we advocate for these ideas and the ways in which we should deliver software. So I was also asked to start thinking about how do we influence an organization through change for an idea that we want to implement. At that point, it was agile, and how do we scale that across an organization? So I got to start thinking about, well, how do we approach change as humans? And, thinking about how our bodies and our minds react to change. How do we move through that change, whether it's positive or negative? We need to be able to move through it. And I started really getting interested in the psychology of change and how we do that and influence it through other people. But at the end of the day, we also have to be effective. And what makes effective teams? Psychological safety. And so I really started developing not just what are the things that we're trying to do as a team, but how do we do that? And what are the things that we need? And so I really got into a deep dive of looking at Amy Edmondson's work in psychological safety. How do we apply it and learn about our own teams through those mechanisms and start building the underpinnings of having an effective. At the end of the day, what I've decided after a lot of reflection was I'm most interested in our experiences as people in tech. Because if we're not having a good experience, how can we truly be our best selves? And if we can't be our best selves, how can we produce something that is really meaningful and providing positive impact to others at the end of the day? We might be able to, but it's not going to be sustainable. So I've been studying on the side organizational psychology, pursuing my master's in that work. And I started developing a program around developer advocacy and thinking about our experiences at Blackboard, but through just luck and circumstance was asked to come implement what I've been building over at Tackle.io. So I get the chance to start ground up with a fairly new company compared to my 17 years at Blackboard and just start from scratch. And it is so amazing to have the opportunity to build from the ground up with a team that is excited about this change, excited about how we can think about our experiences in a positive culture and sustain what we need through the growth of the company.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds amazing. And I think that what strikes me the most when you describe everything is that at the heart, you're describing some internal focus, right? Which
Yes.
I often see developer experience and advocacy and so on, and it's always outside focused. It's like we
Yes.
want our tool to be used by others. So and then you have all these developer experience professionals and people and this focus. But again, it's a customer focus actually, right?
It is.
And
Yeah.
what you are talking about is exactly that. What I'm so interested in is the internal focus. So not how can we, make a good experience for our customers, the developer, but how can we have a great experience for our internal developers,
Yeah.
that are making whatever, it doesn't have to be the developer products. Again, it can be something, completely, let's say it's healthcare, or it's, whatever software you're actually producing. But how can we look internally that we have great experience? And I think from that perspective, it's so natural that you're coming from the testing and DevOps side, right? Because
Yes.
there is always enough time to program. Well, because you have to, right? So, this, they can't take it away. We have to somehow program, we have to code. But
Mhm.
there is not enough time for testing, for DevOps, for pipelines, for CI, for making sure that we have a good code base, we don't have technical debt, we have maybe good meetings, we have a good culture, we understand each other. These are all the things that we can scrape away, and just the bare minimum, let's code.
Yeah.
And so I think, yeah, so when you describe it like this, it makes sense that you, as a tester, arrive at the developer advocacy
Yeah.
role,
And think
right?
about it as a tester early in, at the heart of testing, we care about what is the user going to experience, right?
Hmm.
I got into testing because I cared so much about that user experience. Well, now my users are my engineers in the
Yeah.
whole program, internal. They are my clients. And it's not just about the code that's delivered or application that's created. We think about these core experiences that make us effective and productive. And it's not just, did I deliver a feature? It's the meaning behind that. Do we understand significance and meaningfulness in our work? Do we understand the positive impact we had? Do we have variety in the things that we do? That helps us, one, learn and grow first and foremost, but also keep us interested in what we want to achieve. Do we have
Yeah.
the ability to see it through start to finish? I can't tell you how many projects I started that I just ripped off of for somebody else to finish and not be able to see what happened with it. But all of these things that affect like our well-being and our mental state as workers, really helps drive that experience. And when we can have a good positive experience, we're more committed to our teams and our work and our companies. We become very much tied to the mission of what we want to do, and we're more likely to stay. So we see higher attrition, we see higher job satisfaction. These are all interconnected things that I'm so deeply fascinated by and want to help just make
Yeah.
the best experience possible for anybody.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I did this study that you read the paper about it, right, last year,
Yeah.
about developer experience and what makes a good or a bad developer experience, what changes and so on. And we had these factors, right?
Mhm.
And I really liked to do this study because exactly of the reasons you said, right? It's not only productivity, but it's well-being, it's retention. So there are so many good things that are coming out of a good developer experience. And what I also like, from this experience is that sometimes if you are in this tech bubble, right, everybody's like, oh, engineering is so great. But then we have to think, is it true, right? Is it true that it's so great, or is it just a lot of people are in it for the money, which I think is a fair reason to be in it for it, right? But if you have a good experience, then suddenly it's not only the money why you are in tech, right? It's also
Oh yeah.
because you're having a good experience. And I think a person that's not only because, of the paycheck and things, apart from the paycheck, it's actually miserable here. They write different software than, the person that says, well, I'm in a high paying industry, but what I'm doing, I'm really excited about, right? I feel committed. I feel I'm
Yeah.
proactive, doing something. I can, share my ideas. I have colleagues that help me. This is very different things. And I think those people that have a good experience in their work, they deliver a complete, it's game changing, the kind of software
Yeah.
and product that they are delivering. I mean, that's my experience. How do you see that?
Mine too. I've been on the teams that were became feature factories ultimately, and that was that. Don't worry about the experience of the people, just get these things out. I've been on teams that have really focused on the human aspect, right? And it's just night and day experience. The difference is so vast in what drives somebody to want to deliver the best software at the end of the day. I mean, I don't think nobody shows up and goes to work, I'm going to deliver crap software, right?
Mm.
But it makes it so much easier when you know you have a team you can come in and talk with and ask for help and learn from each other and have clarity in what you're trying to achieve and the processes that help make this as easy as possible. I don't know if you've had this experience before, but one time I was learning to get my local build set up so I could write some automation, and to run it, it took me 5 days to get that
Oh.
first build going on my local machine because it was so convoluted and hard. And at the end, I just felt like I have created fire. But why should that be the experience that we have? Like, it should be so easy. And what if we had a world in which your first line of code is delivered that first day that you join a company or join a team because we've made it so simple for you to just get that build up, deliver your first line, and push it to prod. Like, how delightful of an experience would that be if you can see that you're adding value from day one instead of 6 or 8 or 12 or even longer weeks later, from that first time that you joined that team. And I think when we can have those experiences, like from the ease of being able to do something to understanding to how we work and interoperate with a team, that just makes it so much happier, which matters on our well-being because we need that balance in life too. I mean, I've seen and I've experienced where I've brought a bad work day home and my kids notice, and I don't want that for them, right? I want it to be, even if we've had hard problems, we can do hard things. It's not saying that this is going to be easy, but I
Mm.
am going to make it an enjoyable environment in which to learn and have that safety to fail and celebrate those failures versus feeling like I got yelled at because I missed something as a tester and it made it into production, right? I've been yelled at. It 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 hurts, and you take that and you internalize it, and it might affect how you approach something again in the future or want to raise a risk in the future. And we need that for our own psychological well-being to be able to have that effective experience and become more productive over time.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I think there are a couple of things that really resonate with me. So there are two things that, are quite different that I want to discuss. One is
Yeah.
that you were talking about factors, right? And I also described factors in the paper,
Mhm.
and some of those are technical, right? So,
Yeah.
for example, the CI pipeline, or maybe also having this build go through, having, this image set up so that you can run actually the software. This is more a technical problem. But on the other
Mhm.
hand, we also have the culture problem, which, they're always fading into each other, because if the build doesn't really work, maybe can you reach out to another person? Will, somebody sit at your desk and help you, or will you get, strange looks, and maybe somebody comes over and say, yeah, do it this way, and it's gone. And then you feel bad asking them again, right? So yeah, exactly, right. So there's this technical and the social aspect of it, and I think
Oh yeah.
both are really important. What's your experience with
Yes. It's so critical. I think if we don't have learning behaviors. And by that, I mean, am I on a team that is willing to learn from each other, be able to have the practices in place to know when we need to go learn something and help each other learn? You probably have a variety of skill levels, a variety of skill sets, on your team. And so how can we leverage those from each other to build a cohesive unit as a working group and learn from each other? You have to have some social elements that you're taking account for. If I can't ask for help, I'm going to flounder and fail in my world. I remember my first time learning automation, and I was getting stuck on writing some code for it. And I think some of us have different drivers on, do we feel comfortable asking for help? Do we need to be perfect? Do we just want to please other people, right? Or do we just want to get something done? But if we listen to those drivers in a world, let's say I'm afraid to ask for help. I don't want to ask for help because I don't want to appear weak. What am I going to learn? How am I going to become a part of that team? And when I can ask for help from somebody, that helps create a social bond with that person that makes us want to be able to continue to work for and with each other. And I think it's so critical that we create those relationships as well to help improve that experience overall.
Yeah. So my question is also, Blackboard was a large organization, right?
Yeah.
Or yeah. And now Tech.io is smaller, you said. What's smaller?
Yes.
What's smaller?
So the company itself is 300. So Blackboard, by the time I left, was around 3,000 people.
Yeah.
I go to Tackle.io, 300 people total. So I went from an engineering department that was around 1,200 to an engineering department that is right around 90 people right now.
Okay.
And
That's very different.
I love it. I didn't know what to expect, but what I'm finding is I have the time and the bandwidth to build a relationship with each person in engineering right now.
Mhm.
So my goal is to actually have a one-on-one with every single person in our department, which was not feasible at my last company.
Yeah.
You will at least have met me by the time we hit the end of October. So I finished my first quarter. My goal was to meet every single person in engineering. But I love that because what it lets me do is create that touch point, that human connection with somebody, because not many people want to just open up immediately and say, here's all the things that would help my experience, right? I don't jump in and say, tell me all the things that are wrong so that we can go after and fix them. I will eventually. But how do I create that trust? To me, it's more important to build that relationship, build the trust, so that when I do ask you, I'm coming from a place of honesty and good intent. And really, it's not about complaining. It's about, what can I do to make your experience better? And how do you know that I'm the person that cares so deeply about this, that you will trust me to help make this happen? And so that's really what I'm after. It's kind of amazing in a way. So yeah.
So we have this 300 and this 3,000, and then there are companies in the size of 3, right?
Yeah.
And I actually worked with, a big range from them,
Yep.
even at larger corporations, right, with 100,000 people. But I wonder sometimes, right? With, let's say, Microsoft, for example, is a really large organization, and they have like their own department for developer experience. I mean, it wasn't called developer experience, but it was. I was in this team. It was called Tools for Software Engineer team, or One ES, One Engineering Systems team. So, but the focus is making engineering better for the internal developers, right? But it's a large endeavor because there are like 100,000 people, and a large portion of that, let's say 40 or 50,000, are engineers, right? So, but then you have, like, as you said, 3,303. And lately I have a lot of experience with the smaller companies, right? Let's say 20, let's say 3, maybe 5, 10, 100. And what I also see is that, especially the startups, they also don't value developer experience. Like, then we are so small and everything is just a hustle and a grind, that there is no place for developer experience. I don't know if there's
Oh, it
place
hurts my
for
heart.
it. Yeah, later on, and I always feel like, if you can't focus on developer experience, if you're a 3-person team, or not only developer, even employee, experience, if you are a 3-person startup or a 5-person startup, and all those are afterthoughts, because now we have,
Yeah.
to get to the market and make money, and later on we will think about, how people feel.
Hmm. I
I'm
think
like,
what
this will not work.
it's interesting because so Tackle's my first startup,
Yeah.
and I was really, really intentional when I started, thinking about what is next on my journey
Hmm.
on a company that has proven that they value the employee experience. And I'm not
Hmm.
taking, just engineering, but what impressed me about Tackle is from the start, they cared about well-being. It is in their values that they established as a beginning at the beginning stages of their company that, we care about each other, that we worry about our well-being, and our leadership reflects these values. And, if they see it not happening, and they still do, tap me on the shoulder, say, Ashley, I saw you are on Slack sending a message at midnight. Why? Please don't do that. Or I thought you said you were on vacation. Why are you responding to a message? Things that I don't know that I expected when I joined, but deeply appreciate that it is so ingrained in their culture to care about the experience and our well-being. So I feel really fortunate to land where I did. But what I love is that, they're about, we're on Series C, so, not super early for Tackle, but not quite late stage yet. And they saw the need as they scale and grow their department to worry about the developer experience and care deeply about it enough to create a new program.
Hmm.
So I was super excited that I was selected to come in and help establish this program where, yeah, you don't hear about it too often in the small startup space because, yeah, you got to prove out your value, right? You want to make sure that you're hitting the market need as an early startup, but how do we do that in a way that it focuses on the care and feeding of our engineers it's very easy to dive into just go work all day, all night and deliver this thing because we need to do this, right?
Yeah.
But I love that is not necessarily the case here.
Yeah. Thankfully, I have forgotten the name of the company, because otherwise, I would name and shame, which I'm not the person for. I don't like name and
No, I
shame.
don't
But
like to do that
anyway,
either.
no, I don't like that. So I have forgotten the name. But there was a Twitter thread, and this guy was like, come and work for me. We're like really hard problems, really low pay.
Yeah.
You work all day. No, actually, he didn't say low pay. I think he said competitive. So
Yeah.
competitive pay, but you work, day and night and evenings and whatnot, right?
Yeah.
And if you like free time, don't work for me, and so on, right? And it was the longest thread, and I read through it, and I think it was meant a little bit sarcastic or fun, or I don't know exactly. But
Yeah.
yeah, it was this hustle culture thing, right? And I thought like, wow, I don't know.
Yeah, it's
I think
funny how that
it's,
like puts us off too, right? Like if
yeah,
I read like incredibly passionate about delivering everything, it's like, of course I'm passionate. I wouldn't be applying if I weren't passionate about my role. However, I
yeah,
internalize that as I need you to work all day and all night on this problem until it's out the door. Like
yeah,
it's
yeah,
I'm just not, I'm too old for that. Two, I like to spend time with my family and my kids. Like if
yeah,
I see something like that on a job posting or hear it described like that, it kind of turns me off in a little bit. Like,
yeah.
why am I
And he
not
was,
expected to have balance?
yeah, it was really like, if work life balance for you means to have a lot of free time, this is
Mhm.
not for you, right? Like, wow, what
Ooh,
else should it
that
mean,
is about the
right?
biggest red flag I ever heard.
Yeah, yeah. But I was, what I'm wondering, right? And it was all under this umbrella of, oh, we are a startup, right? And so you have to be super passionate about, and so on. But I wonder if you can get rid this DNA, or if you can stripe it off at one point, right? If you could say, oh, now we are this 10 person and we don't make a lot of revenue, and so we hired all these people that have this mindset of, working day and night, and whatnot,
Mhm.
and so on. And then at one point we transform into this developer friendly, employee friendly entity. I can't imagine, right?
Yeah.
I
I
don't think
think it's
it's
possible. I think you have
working.
to assess, there's things that you can look at. If I put on my organizational psychology hat, right?
Yeah.
You can look at the current culture and what it
Mm-hmm.
is, and you can look at desired culture.
Mm-hmm.
And it could take a very heavy lift and a lot of time to get to that desired culture. But I think it's feasible if you understand where you're starting from, where the desired end state is, and then start putting an action plan in place to get there. So let's say you are in a sales-driven culture, right?
Yeah.
Sell, sell, sell. And it basically informs what your engineering backlog is. It's kind of a dangerous and scary spot to be as well, because what if they sell something that you haven't yet built and they
Yeah.
promise it to somebody? That's a really high stress environment, right? But what if you want to move to a more collaborative and generative environment or culture? Okay, cool. How do we now set the things in place with sales, communicate to them, this is how we want to start doing things, and then start working with them. Well, how can we do this, right? How can we meet in the middle so that you're still able to sell something? Because of course they have targets at the end of the day. But how can we get to a place that is healthy for everybody? Maybe let's sell what's there, not what is in the future. Something can always go wrong, right? And what are the steps we need to take as an organization to support that and start transitioning to a more collaborative and communicative culture from that? Or maybe you have a very hierarchical driven culture. Everything is top down. It's very bureaucratic. I think that you can also set in place the ways to move along this dimension of what is more collaborative in nature, more organic feeling than a very, I like to call it the like 1990s, early 2000s management style. But I've seen us transform. It took years, but we've done it, right? Like I had no problem at Blackboard at the time talking to the CEO if I just wanted to talk about something with him. Whereas earlier in my career, it was very, very difficult to get that call with the CEO to just have a chat or something. It just
Yeah.
depends on what that was like.
Yeah. Maybe there's a German saying. I don't think. Maybe you can tell me if there's an English version of it. I just translated literally, so it doesn't sound very nice. But the, the fish starts to stink at the head. Do you have something like this?
I don't think we do.
But what it means is that leadership somehow sets the stage, right?
Yeah.
For the company and for the culture. And
I-
so what you describe is
Yeah.
is so I've seen too, right? When I joined Microsoft, it was still Balmer there,
Yeah.
and it was an extreme different culture and organization, than when it changed, and it was
takes
transformative.
Yeah.
Right? I
It
was
takes
like,
adaptive leadership to be able to drive that type of change. It takes transformative leadership.
yeah,
I would say the closest that I think I've heard. Well, it's funny. I was just watching Remember the Titans with my children last night. I
yeah,
don't know if you've seen that movie, but it's about a team that comes together, in a point of United States history where we're integrating schools, and a football team forms. And one of the sayings that always sticks out to me is attitude reflects leadership.
hmm,
And I always take that with me because as a leader, my own attitude is going to be mirrored back to me from the people that work with me or for me. And I always try to make sure that I am leading in a way that I can stand by and that I want my team to feel, that they have the best attitude and ability to move forward. But yeah, you have to make that change. It's leadership style, right?
yeah,
You have to be able to work with others and collaborate. Rarely is it going to be a top-down decision-making driven thing that's going to drive change. It's got to come bottom up. It's got to come top-down and sideways to be able to communicate all the things and work together. You have to have a clear vision. You have to be able to guide. You might not have all the answers as that leader, but you sure can ask questions to get there
yeah,
and help the
yeah.
team through that and navigate through that change. Because change, like I said, it can be a change for the better, but it is hard.
Yeah,
Whatever we
change is
do.
extremely hard. Yeah, that's true. I mean, I'm
Yeah.
working with people on code reviews, right? So very focused. At Microsoft, I worked at many different aspects of developer
Mm-hmm.
experience, like the cycle testing and so on. For my workshops right now, I'm really focusing on code reviews.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's one area, and in my workshop, we are going to improve code reviews, right? And the code review processes that people have, and thinking about, how can we make the experience better, and it's hard, right? Even though it's a
Yeah.
small thing,
Yeah.
you would say, well, it's even at the fingertips of developers, but still it's really hard because it's a team practice,
It
right?
is.
So you have to have more people on the team really be willing and committed to make the change. But then if they do it, if they are committed, I mean, it takes wonders, right?
It,
It's really different
huge.
experience. Yeah, it's
It,
huge.
it's not, and it's not just the timing of the code review, because I've also, part of the experience is how fast am I getting my
Yeah.
feedback so that I can make the changes I need to and, get it through. It's what is said in these code
Yeah.
reviews. I remember I was so blocked when I was first learning. I got one of the meanest comments ever, like on a code review. Somebody, I guess, didn't realize it was like one of my first PRs and just like, why would you do it this way? And I can't believe it. I was
Yeah.
like, okay, I think I'm just going to
Oh,
not automate anything ever again or write code ever again. It's fine.
yeah.
So you have to think about the experience there, right? Like, what is that holistic view, not just the timing and how many people are able to do a code review, but what is the content? What is the meaning behind it? Are you actually teaching and coming from a place of learning and growth versus maybe we had a bad day, kind of getting snippy with people, or I just want to get through this code review because I have a lot on my plate. It just depends, right? But I think you need to take that whole view of what
Yeah.
is that whole
Yeah.
experience.
And I actually like code reviews so much because very similar to, developer experience. I would say the developer experience is like the big umbrella, right? And then code reviews
Mm-hmm.
is one aspect of it, but it's an
Yep.
interesting aspect because it's a technical, socio-technical engineering practice, right? So you have the social aspects, you have the technical aspects. So you have to be technical verse as well. And then
Mm-hmm.
you have as the third, the organizational aspect. So in this little practice, you actually have all three most important skill sets in
Oh
there, right?
yeah.
And I think this is what makes it so fascinating. Yeah. So I want to come back a little bit to the paper that I wrote with Avi Noder and Margaret
Yeah.
Unstory, right? It's called, how was it called? Let me see. An actionable framework for developer, for improving and understanding developer experience, right? I think this was the
Yes.
title that we settled on. And so the paper is really, so we made an in-depth study really on what's important for developers, what's impacting their experience, right? For the good and for the bad. And so
Mm-hmm.
we made a list of several factors. So this was a qualitative study. So a couple of themes, we did interviews, a couple of themes emerged, right? And some of them were really the factors. But then it was also what's hindering developer experience. How do people compensate, their negative experience and so on. And you read the paper. What was interesting for you? And was there something in it that you could actually take and apply maybe in your job as
Yeah.
developer experience director?
Yeah. It's when I came across the paper. So how I was approached at my job was, can you take the things that you are learning from organizational psychology and apply them to engineering? Yes, I can. Let's talk. And so I do, I try to do a little bit of research each morning. What's going on in the field? What are other people finding? Because it's still fairly new-ish compared to other
Mhm.
topics in our field, right? And when I came across the research paper, I was so excited on a few fronts. One, that, okay, yes, I am new to like doing research and graduate level work, but I was really happy that my methods are very similarly aligned with your research methods. Granted, it's within my company, but let's have the qualitative interviews. Let's understand, let's find the themes. I had started theming my things out. Then
Mhm.
I was really happy that my themes were aligning with the themes that you also had been
That's good.
outlining,
Yeah.
different words, but ultimately very similar structure, things that we're looking at and hearing from people. But what really fascinated me and what I loved is that holistically looking at the paper, all of these align to things in organizational psychology, from where do we find fulfillment and job satisfaction, the importance of having clarity in our goals, how we work with products. Sure, we're not going to be talking about how we work with product managers in organizational psychology, but we are going to talk about how do we understand our significance? Where do we fit in this universe? Do we understand how we provide value? Do we understand the positive impact we have? Are we able to work iteratively? Are we able to do feedback loops? Everything in software development in the world of psychology is an IPO model, or input process
Mhm.
output model, that is just super cyclical. That's all I look at these diagrams all day long. That's DevOps, that's testing, that's like software development lifecycle, right? Thinking about our tooling when we look at your development and release theme, right? All of those questions we look at, the environment, the health of my code, how confident am I? All of those things come down to our experiences that we can generalize into, or if I like to think, I like, how can I apply it into organizational psychology terms? Because I like to write about it in my classes. But I was so excited to think, okay, I feel like I am home. I'm studying the thing I'm passionate about. I feel like I'm a scientist practitioner, can go forth and do these things. I even like, how do we notice when people aren't feeling these things? How do we notice when people are having a bad experience? I thought that was such a critical part of the paper that's not often talked about. I think, we all say, oh yeah, we should do this based on my experience. But what I really enjoyed was reading, what are what are those implications? What should we look for as leaders? How might people be coping if in the absence of these factors? And those should start to give us some red flags there. If we're not careful, what we might lose people, or worse, not be able to deliver value at the end of the day.
Yeah.
I mean, worse to me is losing people and having somebody have a horrible experience and be turned off from tech, because I almost quit tech, right? Don't want to lose that. But are we going to be able to meet organizational goals without looking at developer experience? I'm not convinced we can, because we're building the thing the organization exists to deliver. And if we don't focus on that experience, what are the implications, not just for our teams and the people, but for the company as a whole? And your paper is just so good. And I can't wait to dive in more for further research on my own, even if it's within my teams. But I just think it's such an opportunity for growth for us to discuss as a community, for us to think about not just what are our personal experiences, but what does science and psychology and organizational psychological research tell us that can be applied here too, for even deeper interventions and looking at that.
Yeah, this sounds really inspirational. So one of the last questions that I have for you is, for my listeners, if they want to improve developer experience at their companies, what would you suggest them? What are some of the things that we should tackle first? Is there some factors that are more important than others? Is there something that you can say in general? This is a good investment
Yeah.
of your time and money.
Yes. So I don't necessarily think you have to go have a separate developer experience program to be effective, but I do think there are a few aspects if you want to show quick wins. What are the things that might be high pain points, low effort, and just start doing? Somebody once said, be the change you want to see. So how can I do that? Maybe it is, oh, I need to talk to my team about psychological safety and run this workshop with them. Maybe I want to make sure that we are clear on how we write stories so that my team has a clear understanding of what work they need to do and why, but also how do we go in and break that work down? What are some short-term wins that we can find to build trust, that people see that we are effective, to then get more and more complex over time? And so I think, some things are really hard and gnarly and take very specific skill sets to do and implement. Those are great. Put them on a roadmap, but think about, what are the short, fastest things I can do that will be even a quick, easy win for my team, make their lives easier, provide value at the end of the day, and maybe not such a heavy lift on maybe one person. And then maybe start to show more and more of those as you grow, and then be able to get the buy-in to build the team that can solely focus on this.
Yeah, yeah. Sometimes it's really hard to get the buy-in, right? So,
So hard.
yeah. Is there something that you can recommend? Like, how do we translate or make sure that other people not in engineering understand the value of developer experience? What's your pitch? I mean, there's the metaphor for technical debt, right? Where
Yeah.
we're talking about that and how you
Nobody cares
invest
about
and so
that.
on. Yeah, exactly. But how can we, I think developer experience is even more complex, right? Because people at least care about the software. So technical
Yeah.
debt, even though it's a hard sale, I think, or a hard sell, at least it's about the software. Developer
Yeah.
experience is even about the people, right? Like it's even more
Yeah.
fuzzy and so on. How can we make sure people understand the value of it? How would you explain it to management or to C-level that this is?
Happy engineers, happy clients, right? If you focus on the happiness and experience of your teams, at the end of the day, you should have happy clients because we are able to produce the things that we think our clients value and see value in, just even all the more effectively. So I think if you can sum it down without having to talk about all the technical aspects, right? What would your slogan be? Mine is always usually people first, software second. However, when I think about in terms of providing the value to C-level, happy engineers, happy developers, happy clients.
Yeah.
It shows, right? There's a saying or analogy here in the US, a happy cow makes better milk. Like,
Oh, yeah, really?
if they're grazing, they're
Yeah.
eating, good food, they're getting access to grass, the milk quality goes up, they're not stressed. It's funny how if you're a human, like think about the stress and the effect of stress on our bodies biologically and physiologically. You can still maybe perform the actions you need to do, but at the end of the day, your blood pressure might be up. If we don't have that stressors on our engineering teams, think about the quality that they might be able to deliver in a sustainable way, in a way that makes them excited to stay at the company and want to be there day in,
Yeah.
day out, and excited to
Yeah.
get up and go to work and work with
Yeah.
their teammates.
I don't think that there is specific developer research exactly on this topic, but I know that there is quite a lot of employee research, right? So
Mhm.
employee experience, which is a topic on its own and it's a little bit older than developer experience, right? So
Mhm.
we borrowed a lot of ideas and concepts from that field actually, and they
Mhm.
show exactly that, right? They show with case studies and with different studies that companies that are valuing, right, the
Yeah.
experience of their employees in general,
Yep.
that those can also value the customers and that they are much
Oh
more
yeah.
successful doing that. Yeah, so I will probably put some of that in the show notes as well, so if people want to deep dive they can. Yeah.
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 Yeah, it all comes down to science and research that's been done, many years over. We're just looking at a specific application of it in
Exactly.
tech, and it's fascinating to see how it's been generalized for more fields than just our industry, right? But when we can take a look back and see, oh yeah, Oldham's job characteristics theory is actually super applicable to us. For
Yeah.
example, like thinking about 5 dimensions of our jobs and what are the critical psychological states that emerge from being able to have positive experiences in those 5 characteristics. And then what are the outputs that we see, right? Retention, higher value, happy client, all of these things, higher productivity, all the things we care about in engineering. That it's just amusing to me to reflect back and like, oh my gosh, this research was done in the 1980s, like
Yeah,
so
and
many
it's
years ago,
still
and still
applicable.
applies
Yeah.
to what we do.
Yeah. That's
And I
true.
love it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, so cool. Well, thank you so much, Ashley, for sharing everything today with me. And I will put everything that we talked about in the show notes. And obviously
Thank
we'll also
you.
link your profile. Is there something as a last message that you want to give to my listeners?
Oh, sure. Let's see. It's always put the people first. I think when in doubt, I've never seen it fail me as a leader.
Yeah.
Think about, your well-being, your team's well-being. If you can put that first, I really feel like the rest will fall into place. And even though those other aspects might be really challenging, because you come from a people first mindset, it makes it so much easier to tackle those challenges together.
Yeah. That's a really good closing note, and I totally agree. So thank you, Ashley, for being on my
Thank
show. It was
you.
really a pleasure talking to you.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Yeah.
Bye bye.
Bye.
This was another episode of the Software Engineering Unlocked podcast. If you enjoyed the episode, please help me spread the word about the podcast. Send the episode to a friend via email, Twitter, LinkedIn, well, whatever messaging system you use, or give it a positive review on your favorite podcasting platform such as Spotify or iTunes. This would mean really a lot to me. So thank you for listening. Don't forget to subscribe, and I will talk to you in 2 weeks. Bye.